The rain drummed against the tall windows of the Manhattan Gallery as Victoria Hayes carefully adjusted the lighting on her latest painting. Her fingers trembled slightly as she stepped back to examine her work. Tonight was the charity auction, and this single piece represented 3 months of her life poured onto canvas. She had named it Dreams in Blue, a swirling masterpiece of ocean waves that seemed to dance with hidden emotions. Victoria smoothed her simple black dress, the only formal outfit she owned. She had bought it secondhand from a thrift store, but she had spent hours altering it to fit perfectly. Her long auburn hair was pulled back in an elegant bun, secured with a vintage clip that had belonged to her grandmother. She looked beautiful, though she would never believe it herself. Victoria, the guests are arriving, called James, the gallery owner. He was a kind man in his 60s who had given Victoria her first real chance to display her art. Remember? Tonight could change everything for you. Victoria nodded, her heart racing. She had grown up in a small town in Vermont, where her father worked at the local hardware store, and her mother taught elementary school. Art had always been her escape, her way of expressing feelings she could never put into words. When she moved to New York City 2 years ago with nothing but a suitcase and her dreams, she had imagined this moment countless times. The gallery began to fill with elegantly dressed people, holding champagne glasses. Victoria watched from the corner as they moved through the space, their jewelry catching the light, their conversations flowing like music. She felt like an outsider looking in. But she reminded herself that her painting belonged here just as much as anyone else's. Across the room, Nathan Sterling adjusted his platinum watch and scanned the crowd with practiced ease. At 34, he had built Sterling Technologies from a college dorm room idea into a global empire worth billions. Tonight's charity auction was just another item on his calendar, a way to write a tax-deductible check while networking with other wealthy donors. Nathan had never needed to think about money. Born into old money and having multiplied it exponentially through his business ventures, he moved through the world with the confidence that came from knowing he could buy almost anything he wanted. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his custom-made suit fit like it had been painted on, and his presence commanded attention wherever he went. He was examining a sculpture when something caught his eye. A painting across the room seemed to glow with an inner light. The blues and whites swirled together in a way that made him think of childhood summers at his family's beach house. Before business and responsibility had consumed his life, Nathan walked closer to the painting, studying the brushstrokes and the way the colors seemed to move, even though the canvas was still. He had collected art for years, but usually as investments rather than for emotional connection. This piece was different. It spoke to something deep inside him that he had forgotten existed. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" A soft voice said beside him. Nathan turned to see a young woman with striking green eyes and a genuine smile. She wasn't wearing the kind of designer dress and expensive jewelry that marked most of the women at these events. Instead, she had a natural elegance that didn't need diamonds to shine. "Yes, it is," Nathan replied, assuming she was another wealthy patron. "The artist has real talent. I'm thinking of making a bid." Victoria felt her cheeks warm. She hadn't expected anyone to notice her standing near her own painting. "What draws you to it?" "The emotion," Nathan said, without hesitation. "Most art I see is technically perfect, but cold. This piece has soul. It makes me feel something I can't quite name." Victoria's heart skipped. This was exactly what she had hoped to achieve with her art, to make people feel, to connect with something deeper than surface beauty. "I'm glad you see that in it. I'm Nathan Sterling," he said, extending his hand with the confidence of someone accustomed to being recognized. "Victoria," she replied simply, shaking his hand. His grip was firm and warm, and she noticed he didn't immediately let go. "Just Victoria?" Nathan smiled charmingly. "Well, just Victoria, I have a proposal for you. This painting is clearly special, and I want to make sure it goes to someone who truly appreciates it. What would you say to $2 million? Victoria's eyes widened in shock. $2 million was more money than she had ever imagined having in her entire lifetime. It would solve every financial problem she had ever faced. She could pay off her student loans, help her parents with their medical bills, and have enough left over to focus on her art without worrying about rent and groceries. But as she looked at Nathan's confident expression, something inside her rebelled. He was treating her painting like a business transaction, assuming that everything had a price and that his money could buy anything he wanted. "It's not for sale," Victoria said quietly. Nathan blinked in surprise. He wasn't used to hearing those words. "I'm sorry, what?" "The painting. It's not for sale." "Not to you. I don't understand," Nathan said, his voice taking on the tone he used in boardrooms when deals weren't going his way. "This is an auction. Everything here is for sale, and $2 million is far above the estimated value." Victoria turned to face him fully, her green eyes flashing with something Nathan had never seen directed at him before: defiance. "Mr. Sterling, I know who you are. Everyone in this room knows who you are. You're used to writing checks and getting whatever you want. But some things can't be bought. Everything can be bought." Nathan said automatically, the words slipping out before he could stop them. "It's just a matter of finding the right price." "That's exactly what I thought you'd say," Victoria replied, her voice steady, despite the way her heart was pounding. "You look at my painting and see an investment opportunity. You see something beautiful, and your first instinct is to own it, to possess it. To put a price tag on it and add it to your collection." Nathan felt stung by her words, partly because they contained an uncomfortable grain of truth. "I appreciate art. I support artists." "No, you collect trophies," Victoria said, her passion for her art giving her courage she didn't know she possessed. "There's a difference between supporting art and consuming it. That painting represents 3 months of my life, every emotion I've ever felt, every dream I've ever had. And you think you can just wave your credit card and take it home? I'm offering you life-changing money," Nathan said, frustrated by his inability to understand this woman's logic. $2 million could transform your entire future." "My future isn't for sale either," Victoria replied. "And the fact that you think it should be tells me everything I need to know about you." Around them, other auction guests had begun to notice their conversation. Nathan was acutely aware that people were watching, probably wondering why someone was arguing with Nathan Sterling about anything, let alone refusing his money. "You're making a mistake," Nathan said, lowering his voice. "I'm trying to help you. Help me." Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Mr. Sterling, you don't even know my last name. But you're ready to throw millions at me because you want something I created. That's not help. That's conquest." Nathan felt something shift inside him as he looked into Victoria's passionate eyes. When was the last time someone had challenged him like this? When was the last time someone had seen through his wealth to question his motives? Most people either wanted something from him or were intimidated by his success. Victoria seemed to be neither. "What if I told you I genuinely loved the painting?" Nathan asked, surprising himself with the vulnerability in his voice. "Then I'd ask you to tell me what you love about it." Victoria replied, "Not what it's worth, not what it represents as an investment, but what it makes you feel." Nathan looked back at the painting, really looked at it this time. The swirling blues reminded him of being 7 years old, standing on the beach while his grandfather taught him to skip stones. It was before his parents' divorce, before boarding school, before he learned that money was the only thing that truly mattered in the world. "It makes me feel peaceful," Nathan said slowly. "Like I'm remembering something I lost a long time ago." Victoria's expression softened slightly. For a moment she saw past the expensive suit and the arrogant confidence to something more human underneath. "That's exactly what I hoped it would do. So will you sell it to me?" Nathan asked hopefully. "No," Victoria said firmly, but her voice was gentler now. "Because the moment you buy it, it stops being about that feeling and becomes about ownership. It becomes another thing you possess instead of something that possesses you." Nathan stared at her, completely bewildered. In his world, everything made sense when you reduced it to numbers and transactions. Victoria was operating by rules he didn't understand, and it frustrated and intrigued him in equal measure. "I don't understand you," Nathan admitted. "I know," Victoria said sadly. "That's the problem." She turned to walk away, but Nathan caught her arm gently. "Wait, what's your last name?" "Hayes," Victoria said. "Victoria Hayes. Victoria Hayes," Nathan repeated, as if testing how the name felt. Will you have dinner with me? Why? Victoria asked suspiciously. Because you're the first person in years who's told me no, Nathan said honestly. And because I want to understand why you turned down enough money to change your life. Victoria studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or ulterior motives. What she saw instead was genuine curiosity mixed with something. It might have been loneliness. One dinner, she said finally. But I pay for my own meal. Nathan almost laughed at the absurdity of Victoria Hayes worrying about paying for dinner when he just offered her $2 million. But something in her expression told him that arguing would end the conversation immediately. One dinner, Nathan agreed, and you can pay for whatever you want. As Victoria walked away to rejoin the auction, Nathan found himself staring after her with a feeling he couldn't quite identify. For the first time in his adult life, he had encountered something he wanted that his money couldn't buy. And instead of frustrating him, it fascinated him. The auction continued around them, but Nathan barely noticed. He kept glancing across the room at Victoria, watching as she talked passionately with other guests about art and creativity. She moved with a grace that had nothing to do with expensive clothes or professional styling, and when she laughed, the sound was genuine and infectious. When the bidding for Dreams in Blue began, Nathan didn't raise his paddle. Instead, he watched as Victoria's painting sold to a young couple who looked at it with the same wonder he had felt. The final price was $30,000, a fraction of what Nathan had offered. But Victoria looked happier with this outcome than she ever could have with his millions. As the evening wound down, Nathan approached Victoria one more time. Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. Do you know Rossetti's on the Upper West Side? The little Italian place? Victoria asked, surprised. She had expected him to suggest somewhere expensive and exclusive. My grandfather used to take me there when I was little, Nathan said. Before he taught me that everything worth having has a price. Victoria looked into his eyes and saw something. There that made her heart skip. Glimpse of the 7-year-old boy who had skipped stones on the beach and believed in magic before the world taught him. Otherwise, 7 o'clock, Victoria agreed. But Nathan, yes? Don't try to buy me dinner. Don't try to buy me anything. If you want to understand me, you're going to have to do it without your credit card. Nathan nodded. Though the idea of navigating a relationship without the safety net of his wealth terrified him more than any business deal ever. Had his Victoria disappeared into the New York night? Nathan realized that for the first time in years, he was looking forward to something that money couldn't guarantee. Tomorrow night, he would have to rely on something he hadn't used in decades himself. Victoria spent the entire next day questioning her decision to have dinner with Nathan Sterling. She tried to focus on her work at the small coffee shop where she served lattes to pay her rent, but her mind kept wandering to their conversation at the gallery. There had been something vulnerable in his eyes when he talked about his grandfather, something real beneath all that polished confidence. Her coworker Jenny noticed her distraction immediately. You're glowing today, Jenny said with a knowing smile. Did something happen at that fancy auction last night? I met someone, Victoria admitted, wiping down the espresso machine for the 3rd time. Someone good or someone complicated? Complicated, Victoria sighed. Very, very complicated. Nathan, meanwhile, was having his own crisis of confidence. He had canceled 3 business meetings and spent the morning pacing his penthouse office, trying to figure out how to have a normal conversation with someone who wasn't impressed by his net worth. His assistant, David, knocked on the door with his usual stack of contracts and investment reports. Sir, you missed the board meeting with the Tokyo investors? Should I reschedule? What? Nathan looked up, startled. He never missed meetings. Yes, reschedule everything. Actually, David, can I ask you something personal? David blinked in surprise. In 5 years of working for Nathan, their conversations had never ventured beyond business. Of course, sir. How do you talk to women? I mean, how do you have a normal conversation without talking about work or money? David stared at his boss as if he had grown a second head. Sir, are you feeling all right? Just answer the question, well, David said carefully. I usually ask about their interests, their family, what makes them happy. I listen to what they say instead of thinking about what I want to say next. And I try to be genuinely interested in who they are as a person. Nathan nodded seriously. as if David had just explained a complex financial strategy. Interests, family, happiness. Got it? That evening, Nathan arrived at Rossetti's 15 minutes early, wearing jeans and a simple button-down shirt instead of his usual designer suits. He felt strangely naked without his armor of expensive clothes and accessories. But he remembered Victoria's challenge to meet her without his credit. Card Rossetti's was exactly as he remembered from childhood visits with his grandfather. Red checkered tablecloths, the smell of garlic and oregano in the air, and walls covered with photographs of the family that had run the restaurant for 3 generations. Nathan chose a small table by the window and tried to calm his nerves. Victoria arrived precisely at 7, wearing a flowing sundress in soft yellow that made her auburn hair glow like autumn leaves. She looked around the restaurant with obvious delight. "This place is perfect," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "It feels like someone's home." "My grandfather brought me here every Saturday when I was little," Nathan said, surprised by how easily the memory came back. He said the best conversations happened over simple food. "What happened to those Saturday dinners?" Victoria asked gently. Nathan's expression darkened slightly. "He died when I was 12. After that, my parents decided I needed to focus on more important things. Business dinners, networking events, preparing for my future." "I'm sorry," Victoria said, and Nathan could hear the genuine sympathy in her voice. "It sounds like he was special to you." "He was the only person who ever told me that being rich wasn't the same thing as being successful," Nathan said quietly. "I didn't understand what he meant until yesterday." The waitress, an elderly Italian woman named Rosa, approached their table with a warm smile. "Nathan, Madonna mia, look how handsome you've become. Your Nana would be so proud." Nathan felt his throat tighten unexpectedly. "Hello, Rosa, this is Victoria Bella," Rosa exclaimed, taking Victoria's hands in hers. "You have kind eyes, this one. Nathan, you bring her back, yes?" As Rosa bustled away to get their menus, Victoria studied Nathan's face. "She remembers you after all these years." "My grandfather was friends with the family. He said real relationships were more valuable than business connections." Nathan shook his head ruefully. "Another lesson I forgot somewhere along the way." They ordered simple pasta dishes and shared a bottle of house wine. As the evening progressed, Nathan found himself talking about things he hadn't discussed in years. His childhood dreams of becoming an artist like his grandfather, who had painted watercolors as a hobby. His fear that he had built his entire identity around his bank account. His loneliness in a world where everyone wanted something from him. "I haven't painted in 20 years, Nathan admitted, as they shared tiramisu for dessert. "I convinced myself I didn't have time for impractical things." "What would you paint if you started again?" Victoria asked. Nathan thought for a moment, looking out the window at the busy street. "I think I'd paint this. This moment. This feeling of sitting with someone who sees me instead of my portfolio." Victoria felt her heart flutter. Despite everything she had told herself about staying objective, Nathan was revealing layers of himself that made her want to know more. "Why did you really want to have dinner with me?" "Honestly, because you challenged everything I believe about the world," Nathan said. "You made me remember that there are things money can't buy, and I haven't felt that way since I was 7 years old." "What do you believe about the world?" Victoria asked curiously. "That everything has a price? That success means accumulation. That if you're not constantly growing and acquiring, you're falling behind." Nathan paused. "What do you believe?" "That the best things in life are free. That success means being true to yourself. That connection and creativity matter more than accumulation." Victoria smiled softly. "We're pretty much opposites, aren't we?" "Completely," Nathan agreed. "It should make this impossible. This. Whatever this is," Nathan gestured between them. "This feeling I have when I look at you. This desire to be someone worthy of your respect." Victoria felt her defenses wavering. "Nathan, you don't need to change for me. You just need to remember who you were before the world told you money was everything. What if I've forgotten how to be that person?" "Then maybe I can help you remember," Victoria said softly. "If you're willing to try." Nathan reached across the table and gently took her hand. "I'm willing to try anything." But I have a proposition for you. Victoria tensed. I told you I'm not for sale. Not that kind of proposition, Nathan said quickly. A challenge. You think money doesn't matter and I think it's everything? What if we tested both theories? What do you mean? Spend a week in my world. Let me show you what money can do, how it can solve problems, and create opportunities. And I'll spend a week in yours, living on whatever you make at the coffee shop. Seeing what life is like when you have to choose between paying rent and buying groceries? Victoria stared at him. You want to trade lives? I want to understand each other, Nathan said intensely. You think I'm shallow and materialistic. I think you're naive and impractical. What if we're both wrong? And what happens at the end of the week? We see who learns more about what really matters, Nathan said. And maybe we figure out if two people from completely different worlds can find some kind of middle ground. Victoria considered the proposal. It was crazy, but something about the earnest hope in Nathan's eyes made her want to try. What are the rules? No cheating. You live completely in my world for a week. Designer clothes, expensive restaurants, first-class everything. I live completely in yours, your apartment, your job, your budget, and after the week. Honestly. I'm hoping we both discover that what matters most is the person you choose to share your world with. Regardless of how much money is in it, Victoria looked into Nathan's eyes and saw something there that made her heart race. This wasn't about winning a bet or proving a point. This was about two people trying to bridge a gap that seemed impossible to cross. Okay, Victoria said finally. 1 week. But Nathan, yes, don't fall in love with the money. Fall in love with what money can do when it's used with purpose. And you, Nathan said, squeezing her hand gently, don't fall in love with the luxury. Fall in love with the possibility of what we could build together. As they left Rossetti's that night, both Nathan and Victoria knew they were about to embark on something that would change them forever. Neither of them realized that by the end of the week. They would discover that the most valuable thing in the world couldn't be bought, sold, or traded. It could only be given freely, from one heart to another. The experiment began on Monday morning with Nathan standing outside Victoria's tiny studio apartment. Wearing his most casual clothes and carrying a single suitcase, Victoria opened the door in a stunning designer dress that Nathan's stylist had selected. Looking beautiful, but deeply uncomfortable. I feel like I'm wearing a costume, Victoria said, tugging at the silk fabric. I feel like I'm about to play the hardest role of my life, Nathan replied. Looking at the narrow stairway and cramped quarters he'd be calling home for the next week, they spent the morning showing each other their respective worlds. Nathan taught Victoria how to use his private jet for a quick trip to his favorite art dealer in Boston, while Victoria showed him how to make a proper latte at the coffee shop where he'd be working. The trick is in the foam, Victoria explained, demonstrating the technique on the ancient espresso machine. You have to listen to the milk. We'll feel when it's ready. Nathan tried to replicate her movements, but ended up with a burnt mess. This is harder than managing a merger, he muttered. Everything worthwhile is hard, Victoria said gently. That's what makes it meaningful. By Wednesday, both of them were struggling with their new realities. Nathan had burned his hand on the espresso machine, received 3 customer complaints, and discovered that Victoria's apartment had a leaky ceiling and a heating system that only worked sporadically. He spent his evenings sketching by candlelight when the electricity bill proved too expensive, and slowly remembered why he had loved creating art as a child. Victoria, meanwhile, was staying in Nathan's penthouse and living a life of unimaginable luxury. She had a personal chef, a driver, and access to experiences most people only dreamed about. But the more she experienced, the more hollow it felt without someone to share it with. I went to the Met today, Victoria told Nathan over the phone on Wednesday night. Private tours, access to pieces the public never sees. It was incredible, but, Nathan asked, hearing something in her voice. But I kept wishing you were there to see it with me. All this beauty, all this privilege, it felt meaningless without connection. Nathan smiled, lying on Victoria's lumpy couch with a sketch pad balanced on his chest. I made my first decent latte today. Mrs. Chen, one of your regular customers, said it was almost as good as yours. That's wonderful. How does it feel? Like I actually accomplished something, Nathan said, surprised by the pride in his voice. I've made billion-dollar deals that felt less satisfying than making an elderly woman's smile over her morning coffee. By Friday, both of them were ready to admit that the experiment had taught them more than they'd expected. Nathan had rediscovered his love of simple pleasures and genuine human connection. Victoria had learned that money, when used thoughtfully, could be a tool for creating positive change rather than just accumulating possessions. They met at Rossetti's again on Friday evening, both of them exhausted, but somehow more themselves than they'd been in years. "So," Victoria said, sliding into the familiar booth across from Nathan, "what did you learn?" "That you were right about almost everything," Nathan admitted. "Money doesn't buy happiness. It doesn't create real relationships. And it definitely doesn't make coffee taste better when you're drinking it alone. And I learned that you were right about some things too," Victoria said softly. "Money can solve problems. It can create opportunities. And when it's used with love and purpose, it can change lives." Nathan reached across the table and took her hands. "Victoria, this week made me realize something. I don't want to go back to my old life. I don't want to be the man who thinks everything has a price. What do you want?" "I want to be the man who deserves your love," Nathan said simply. "I want to use everything I have to build something beautiful with you. I want to paint again and laugh again. And remember what it feels like to be truly alive." Victoria felt tears welling in her eyes. "Nathan, I'm scared of what?" "Of losing myself in your world. I'm forgetting who I am when I'm surrounded by all that luxury." Nathan smiled and reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Victoria's breath caught as he opened it to reveal not the massive diamond she might have expected, but a simple ring with a modest stone that caught the light like captured starlight. "This was my grandmother's ring," Nathan said softly. "She gave it to my grandfather when they had nothing but love and hope for the future. He always said it was worth more than all his business dealings combined because it represented something that couldn't be bought or sold." Victoria stared at the ring, her heart pounding. "Nathan, what are you asking me?" "I'm asking you to marry me," Nathan said, his voice trembling with emotion. "Not because I can give you a life of luxury, but because I can't imagine a life worth living without you. I'm asking you to help me remember how to be human. I'm asking you to let me love you exactly as you are, while you help me become the man I want to be. And what about our different worlds?" "We'll create a new one," Nathan said intensely. "One where your art matters more than my stock portfolio. Where we measure success by the lives we touch instead of the money we make. Where we remember that the most valuable thing in the world is to people choosing to love each other every single day." Victoria looked into Nathan's eyes and saw the man she had fallen in love with. Not the billionaire, not the successful businessman, but the 7-year-old boy who had painted watercolors with his grandfather and believed in magic. "Yes," she whispered, and then louder, "Yes, Nathan Sterling. I'll marry you." As Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger, Victoria realized that they had both been wrong about love having a price. Love wasn't something you could buy or sell. It was something you chose to give freely, and when you found someone willing to give it back, it became the most valuable thing in the world. 6 months later, Nathan and Victoria stood in a small church in Vermont, surrounded by people who loved them for who they were rather than what they had. The morning sun streamed through stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the wooden pews where Victoria's family sat proudly in the front. Nathan had stepped back from day-to-day operations of his company to focus on philanthropy and art. Victoria had opened a community art center funded by Nathan's resources but guided by her vision. Together, they were building something neither of them could have created alone. As they exchanged vows, Nathan promised to never forget that the best things in life couldn't be bought. Victoria promised to help him use his resources to make the world more beautiful. Their words weren't written by expensive wedding planners, but came straight from their hearts. "I promise to love you not because you're perfect," Nathan said, his voice thick with emotion, "but because you're perfect for me. I promise to support your dreams, celebrate your successes, and remind you every day that you deserve all the love and happiness in the world. I promise to love you not, despite your flaws," Victoria replied, tears streaming down her face, but including them, because they make you human and real and mine. I promise to challenge you when you need it, support you always, and build something beautiful with you that's ours alone. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, their kiss tasted like forever. In the audience, Rosa from Rossetti's wiped away happy tears, remembering Nathan's grandfather and knowing he would have been proud to see his grandson choose love over everything else. The reception was held in Victoria's family's backyard, strung with simple white lights and filled with genuine laughter rather than obligatory networking. Nathan found himself teaching Victoria's young cousins how to skip stones in the small pond, remembering his own grandfather's patient hands guiding his throws so many years ago. "You know what I love most about this?" Victoria said, joining him by the water's edge. "What's that?" "It's real. Every smile, every laugh, every person here chose to be here because they care about us, not because of what they might gain." Nathan wrapped his arms around his new wife, watching the sunset paint the Vermont sky in shades of gold and pink. "A year ago, I thought happiness could be measured in stock portfolios and real estate portfolios. Now I know it's measured in moments like this, and I thought I could never belong in your world," Victoria admitted. "But we didn't adapt to each other's worlds. We created our own." Their honeymoon was spent not on some exotic island resort, but traveling to small towns across America, visiting local artists and community centers, quietly funding programs that brought art education to underserved children. Nathan discovered that using his wealth to create opportunities for others brought him more satisfaction than any luxury purchase ever had. Upon their return to New York, they moved into a brownstone that perfectly blended Nathan's refined taste with Victoria's bohemian warmth. The walls were covered with Victoria's paintings alongside works from unknown artists they had discovered on their travels. Nathan's study contained both his business awards and his grandfather's old easel, which he had finally retrieved from storage. One evening, exactly 1 year after their first meeting at the gallery, Victoria found Nathan in his study, painting. The canvas showed two figures walking hand in hand through a swirling landscape of blues and golds, their faces turned toward a bright horizon. "What are you calling this one?" Victoria asked, settling into the chair beside his easel. "Dreams in Color," Nathan said, adding a final brushstroke to the couple's intertwined hands. "It's about two people who found out that love doesn't come in black and white, rich and poor, possible and impossible. It comes in every shade imaginable when you're brave enough to paint outside the lines." Victoria laughed, the same genuine sound that had captivated Nathan that first night. "That's quite poetic for a former ruthless businessman." "I had a good teacher," Nathan said, setting down his brush and pulling Victoria onto his lap. "She taught me that the most valuable things in life are the ones you can't put a price tag on." "And what did you teach me?" Victoria asked, though she already knew the answer. That having resources isn't evil if you use them with love. That money can be a paintbrush for creating positive change in the world. And that sometimes the best way to help people is to give them the tools to help themselves. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the city lights twinkle beyond their window. The community art center had become a beacon of hope in the neighborhood, offering free classes to children and adults who had never imagined they could create something beautiful. Nathan's business continued to thrive under new leadership that prioritized ethical practices, employee welfare alongside profits. "I got a call today," Victoria said eventually. "The Whitney Museum wants to feature our story in their upcoming exhibition. It's about love and art in the modern age." "What did you tell them?" "That our love story isn't really about us. It's about what happens when two people choose to see beyond surface differences to the heart underneath. It's about learning that true wealth isn't what you have, but what you're willing to share." Nathan smiled, thinking about how much they had both changed since that rainy night at the gallery. "Do you ever regret turning down my $2 million offer?" "Never," Victoria said without hesitation. "Because if I had taken your money that night, I would have gotten a check. Instead, I got a soulmate. And if you had sold me that painting, I would have gotten another possession for my collection. Instead, I got a wife who taught me how to live again." Years passed, and their love story continued to inspire others. Nathan and Victoria's Community Art Center became a model replicated in cities across the country. Nathan discovered that teaching young entrepreneurs about ethical business practices brought him more satisfaction than any profit margin ever had. Victoria's paintings now hung in galleries around the world, but she never forgot the lesson she had learned that night at the charity auction. True art wasn't about the price tag. It was about the connection between the artist's soul and the viewer's heart. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Nathan surprised Victoria with a small ceremony at Rossetti's, where they renewed their vows surrounded by the people who had watched their love story unfold. Rosa, now in her 80s but still sharp as ever, served them the same tiramisu they had shared on their first date. "You know what I learned?" Nathan said to Victoria as they walked hand in hand through Central Park that evening, the city lights twinkling around them like fallen stars. "What's that?" Victoria asked, squeezing his hand gently. "That the richest man in the world isn't the one with the most money in his bank account. It's the one who wakes up every morning grateful for the love he's been given." Victoria stopped walking and turned to face her husband, seeing in his eyes the same wonder and vulnerability that had captured her heart that very first night. "And you know what I learned? Tell me that some things are worth more than money, precisely because they can't be bought. They can only be earned through kindness, nurtured through patience, and kept through choosing love every single day." As they continued their walk, neither of them noticed the young couple sitting on a nearby bench, arguing about whether love could survive financial struggles. But the woman had overheard their conversation, and something in their words gave her hope that maybe, just maybe, love really could conquer everything. Because sometimes the most important stories aren't the ones we live for ourselves, but the ones we live to inspire others to believe in the impossible. 10 years after their first meeting, Nathan and Victoria had built something extraordinary together. Their foundation had funded over 100 community art centers across the country. Nathan's company had become a model for ethical business practices, proving that doing good and doing well weren't mutually exclusive. Victoria's art had evolved too, incorporating mixed media and community collaboration. Her latest series, Faces of Hope, featured portraits of people whose lives had been touched by their programs: children who discovered they could paint their dreams, adults who found new careers through art therapy, elderly people who rediscovered joy through creative expression. On a quiet Sunday morning, they sat together in their garden, Nathan sketching while Victoria worked on a new painting. The scene was peaceful, domestic, utterly ordinary and completely perfect. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had said yes that first night?" Victoria asked, mixing colors on her palette. "You mean if you had taken the 2 million? Nathan looked up from his drawing. "We never would have had this conversation. I would have walked away thinking I was right about everything. You would have been just another transaction in my life, and I would have been rich but empty," Victoria mused. "Having money without purpose, success without meaning. Instead, we've both learned that the only wealth that matters is the kind you share," Nathan said, reaching over to squeeze her paint-covered hand. "The only success worth having is the kind that lifts others up alongside you." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of children's laughter from the art center next door. Sunday workshops had become a neighborhood tradition, with whole families creating art together. Nathan and Victoria often joined in, teaching alongside volunteer instructors and learning as much as they taught. "Mrs. Victoria?" "Mr. Nathan." A small voice called from the fence separating their properties. 8-year-old Maria peered through the slats, her face bright with excitement. "Look what I painted." She held up a canvas covered in swirls of blue and gold, remarkably similar to Victoria's dreams in blue that had started everything. The resemblance wasn't coincidental. Maria had been studying Victoria's technique for months. "It's beautiful, Maria," Victoria said, walking to the fence. "What does it make you feel?" "Happy," Maria said without hesitation. "Like anything is possible if you believe in it hard enough." Nathan joined them at the fence, marveling at how the child had captured the same sense of hope and possibility that had drawn him to Victoria's work years ago. "What are you going to call it?" "Dreams come true," Maria announced proudly. "Because that's what happens when you don't give up on what you..." After Maria skipped away to show her painting to other friends, Nathan and Victoria stood together in comfortable silence. watching the bustling activity at the art center. "She's right, Nathan said finally. "Dreams do come true when you don't give up on what you love." "Speaking of dreams," Victoria said with a mysterious smile, "I have some news." Nathan turned to face her fully, noting the special glow in her expression. "What kind of news?" "The kind that means our love story is about to get even more interesting," Victoria said, placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby." Nathan's face transformed with wonder and joy. He lifted Victoria off her feet, spinning her around their garden as she laughed with pure happiness. When he set her down, both of them were crying. "Another little artist?" Nathan asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Or maybe a little business mogul with a heart," Victoria replied. "Either way, they'll know that the most valuable inheritance we can give them isn't money. It's the knowledge that love and purpose matter more than anything else." As the sun set over their garden that evening, Nathan and Victoria sat together, planning for the future. They talked about teaching their child to paint and to dream, about showing them that success meant making the world a little brighter, about raising them to understand that true wealth came from loving generously and living authentically. Their love story had become legendary in New York's social circles, not because of the money involved, but because it proved that two people from different worlds could create something beautiful together when they were willing to see beyond the surface to the heart underneath. Nathan Sterling had thought Victoria Hayes had a price, but he discovered that love was priceless. And Victoria learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do is teach someone else how to value what really matters. Together, they built a life that was rich in all the ways that counted. Their story ended not with a dramatic conclusion, but with the quiet contentment of two people who had found their home in each other's hearts, proving that the greatest love stories don't end at all, they simply continue. One ordinary, extraordinary day at a time. Years later, when people asked them for the secret to their happiness, Nathan and Victoria would share the same answer. "We learned that the most valuable thing in the world isn't something you can buy. It's something you choose to give freely every single day to the person who sees your true self and loves you not in spite of it, but because of it." And in their art center, where children still painted their dreams in brilliant colors, Maria's painting hung in a place of honor, reminding everyone who saw it that sometimes the most beautiful things in life begin with the simple belief that love really can conquer all. The end.